Hi, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from RicoScores, and today we're talking about the Commanders versus the Falcons, is what it seems like for Bobby Slowik and Ben Johnson right now. Of course, there are probably other people in the running, but these seem to be the two most aggressive teams when it comes to all of the reporting that I'm seeing right now. So first of all, Bobby Slowik, Texans offensive coordinator, quarterback developer, elite quarterback developer, offensive genius mind behind what the Texans did this year, will interview in person with the Washington Commanders tonight for our head coaching candidacy opening. Also, Ben Johnson's second interview is on the way. His in-person interview is on the way. The problem is this guy keeps winning, so it keeps further delaying when we can actually interview this guy in person. But the Commanders have officially reached out to get permission to interview Ben Johnson once he's finally done coaching for the Detroit Lions, at the very least for this season. Whether he win all the way, go to the Super Bowl, or if he loses this upcoming matchup in the playoffs, whatever it is. But right now, again, like I said, the Washington Commanders and Atlanta Falcons seem like the battle for potentially top head coaching candidates right now, because for both head coaches being discussed in this video, Bobby Slowik and Ben Johnson, both the Commanders and Falcons are the only two teams mentioned so far. So of course, just like how we have done with the Carolina Panthers, it is time to size up the Commanders' opponent for a top candidate, whether it was GM or head coach potentially. And this time it's the Falcons, and it's for Bobby Slowik and Ben Johnson. We're going to take a look at what the Falcons look like and why the Commanders would be a better landing spot for either of those head coaches than the Falcons. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Stay tuned, because I know y'all saw that whole Mel Kiper thing mocking us, Jaden Daniels second overall in this upcoming draft. I'm doing a full video breakdown on that, and we're going to do a full dive into Jaden Daniels' strengths and weaknesses. So be on the lookout for that later on this evening / tonight. But of course, we're here to focus on this whole Commanders versus Falcons for Bobby Slowik versus Ben Johnson situation that we have going on right now. So let's go ahead and get to that right now. Let's get it. All right, so as of 8 a.m., well, technically 7:59 a.m. to be exact, Ian Rappaport reported / tweeted out, because again, now Twitter is where a lot of this stuff is done. That's why I literally made a Twitter. This is like the first access to all news, any information of sports, or really even outside of sports. But Ian Rappaport tweeted, Texans offensive coordinator Bobby Slowik, who impressed this season thanks to his work with potential Rookie of the Year CJ Stroud, has an in-person interview with the Commanders tonight, sources said, and has a second interview with the Falcons later this week as well. Again, notice the only two names confirmed and mentioned are the Commanders and the Falcons. You'll see why we're going to size them up throughout this video. Also, shouts out to Albert Breer for this, because he pointed out the fact that Slowik did work with Washington GM Adam Peters in San Francisco for a couple of years. They both crossed paths, and I'm pretty sure Adam Peters is very familiar with them. And Adam Peters probably was one of the people that also knew that he could potentially go to that Texans job and be a great offensive coordinator. He probably believed in him and foresaw that as well, and could potentially want to bring him in as a head coach for sure. Even if he's not his number one candidate, I'm pretty sure Adam Peters is very much so interested in Bobby Slowik as a potential head coaching candidate here for sure. And another connection, how about directly to the Burgundy and Gold, the DMV area himself? Because don't forget, this guy was a part of that cursed 2013 elite coaching staff that is probably the most underperforming coaching staff in NFL history. Like, y'all have seen the graphic with Mike McDaniels over there running arguably the most explosive offense in the NFL for the Dolphins. Sean McVay, the genius that he's been with the Rams, Super Bowl winner. Kyle Shanahan over there orchestrating arguably the most talented roster in the NFL and offensive genius as well. Matt LaFleur, what he did with the Green Bay Packers this year, and Jordan Love and all of that type of stuff. And don't forget Raheem Morris, a great defensive coordinator for the Rams, the guy that Jalen Ramsey went out of his way like a couple of days ago to say that out of any defensive coordinator in the NFL, he would argue that Raheem Morris is the guy that most defensive players would want to play for. And he was also really good and arguably countered Ben Johnson and his Lions in that playoff game. The Lions ended up winning, but you could argue that Aaron Glenn had more to deal with that, the Lions defensive coordinator, than Ben Johnson did as far as who gets the most credit for that win against the Rams. And I feel like Raheem Morris did a great job as defensive coordinator for the Rams this year. He's a top head coaching candidate. He was there as well. And then you have the man of the hour, Bobby Slowik, as a defensive assistant on that 2013 coaching staff. So we were so poorly managed that year that one of the brightest offensive minds in the NFL was a defensive assistant in 2013 for that Redskins coaching staff. I mean, that's just crazy. Now, of course, it's not that cut and dry. Of course, maybe not even Bobby Slowik knew at that time that he had the potential to be one of the most elite NFL minds as far as offense goes. But still, that's just crazy how poorly managed we were. We had Bobby Slowik as a defensive assistant. Now, hopefully, we can maybe bring him in to hire him as a head coach. So now this means that the Commanders will have second interviews with everyone from their list that they're allowed to have. So that includes Raheem Morris, who we just spoke on, Bobby Slowik, and also, of course, sadly, Dan Quinn. Now we just have to wait for Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Mike McDonald, Anthony Weaver. Those guys are still in the playoffs right now, which is, again, like I've explained in a previous video, the good and the bad of going for an elite coordinator to become your next head coach. The good is they're elite. There's a reason they're still in the playoffs right now. They deserve a lot of credit for their team still being in the running for a Super Bowl late January. But at the same time, the downside is that we can't even get a chance to really talk to these guys, especially in person. We've had virtual interviews at the very least with most of those guys, most notably like a Ben Johnson. We've interviewed them virtually, but we can't have a guy like that or Mike McDonald come in for an in-person interview until they are no longer coaching for that team for this 2023 season. So we gotta wait. That's the downside, man. I mean, the reason that we want them is because they're in the playoffs, but also because they're in the playoffs is the reason that we can't interview them for a head coaching position officially. We can't talk numbers. We can't do anything. Everything that we've done so far virtually is just preliminary. Hi, my name is, and I'm fairly interested, but at this point, their main focus is on coaching their teams and trying to win a Super Bowl right now. Of course, they would like to win a Super Bowl with their future team, but right now they have a chance to win the Super Bowl with their current team. So those interviews were pretty secondary. I'm pretty sure Ben Johnson, even if he is interested in the Commanders head coaching job, he may be excited, but he couldn't be too excited because he's like, yeah, that's cool and all. Yeah, we'll talk later. I got to focus on winning the Super Bowl right now. I got a game plan for this upcoming Buccaneers game that he killed. They went crazy in that game as well. Now, moving on to Ben Johnson specifically, Tom Pelissero came out and tweeted/reported, the Commanders and Falcons are both expected to send a contingent to Detroit next week to conduct second interviews with Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson and defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. No more interviews are permitted with coaches still in the playoffs until after Sunday's games. And again, notice the two teams mentioned there, Commanders and Falcons, not even the Panthers yet. Maybe the Panthers have realized that, yeah, we're just not a good destination. Maybe they're out of the running for a Ben Johnson. Maybe they're not. I'm just speculating. I'm just throwing this out there. But as you notice, no GM candidate, the current COO of the Lions, a potential GM candidate, interviewed with the Panthers and then decided, nah, I'm good. And then the Panthers had interviews with a lot of notable GMs, but then ended up just promoting their assistant GM to GM. Maybe that's just a look that, hey, man, nobody wants to come here. Some people were willing to take interviews, found out what we had going on, really dove into what we have, and then was like, nah, we're good. And so maybe, I'm again speculating, the Panthers was just to the point where the only GM they could potentially have was just to promote their assistant GM. And maybe potential head coaching candidates wise, they're starting to feel like, yeah, man, we don't really have much of a chance here. And so maybe they're pulling their name out of the hat. I don't know, out of the running. Could just be speculating, but it's just really interesting to me that when we're talking Bobby Slowik, reported by Ian Rappaport, and then Ben Johnson reported from Tom Pelissero, the only two names mentioned for both of those teams are the Commanders and the Falcons. The Tom Pelissero one for Ben Johnson is very interesting because we're like, the Bobby Slowik one is like, yeah, we're the most recent if anything. But the Ben Johnson one, so far, we're the only ones to send a contingent to the Detroit Lions to next week to conduct second interviews with Ben Johnson right now. We're the only ones. So that one is very interesting. And of course, everybody on the internet right now, Twitter especially, anywhere you look, are doing film breakdowns of what Ben Johnson did to the Buccaneers. And boy, it's phenomenal. I mean, you have Darren Orlovsky breaking down the high-low concept that Ben Johnson does. It's phenomenal. Of course, my dog, Mark Bullock, over there in the UK, make sure you subscribe to Substack, follow him on Twitter and everything. He does film breakdowns for everything. He's done consecutive film breakdowns for Ben Johnson after each playoff game. So if you're into that type of stuff, man, that's a great follow there. Mark Bullock did a great film breakdown of Ben Johnson versus the Buccaneers and how beautiful that game plan was and how he was able to get guys open, get receivers open, and how he made things easy for Jared Goff as well. So you'd be very excited about that. Another thing you would be very excited about, the latest odds from BetOnline AG, of course, still have Detroit Lions defensive coordinator Ben Johnson as the favorite to be the next head coach, but a lot of things shifted around. Bobby Slowik went from second to fourth for some reason. Raheem Morris is now second at 9-4 odds. Of course, Ben Johnson is number one by far. 2 out of 3 odds, -150. Raheem Morris is second, distant second, 9-4, +225. Dan Quinn is third for some ridiculous reason. Then it's Bobby Slowik. Then it's Eric Bieniemy, who is now risen even further as well. Then Mike McDonald, 9-1, and then you just go on and on and on with a whole bunch of other candidates. We'll be here forever. I see my Georgia Bulldog Todd Monken down there at the very bottom, 50-1 odds. Hey, I ain't mad at it. Looks like he's tied for like 9th with like 8-10 other head coaching candidates, but still, I love seeing a Georgia Bulldog up there. Of course, speaking of Georgia Bulldog, Mike McDonald, just to remind y'all, is a Georgia Bulldog through and through. Even more of a Georgia Bulldog than Todd Monken is. Love Todd Monken. Thank you for the championships, but Mike McDonald is a pure Bulldog. Went there, coached there, everything. Now, moving on, it's time to break down whether, like, if this is really a Commanders versus Falcons situation for Ben Johnson or Bobby Slowik, but most notably, Ben Johnson. That's what we're going to focus on today. Let's size them up, just like we've done with the Panthers in several videos. Who is the better landing spot between the Commanders and whoever's competing against the Commanders for Ben Johnson as a potential head coach and landing spot? So let's get it, man. How do you feel about this? We're going to compare general manager. We're going to compare cap space. We're going to compare current roster. We're going to compare recent winning and or team history. We're going to compare, of course, draft capital and all of that. So let's go ahead and get to it, man. Who's going to come out on top? Who, if you're Ben Johnson, looks like the better opportunity for you to go and potentially win a Super Bowl as soon as possible? Commanders or the Falcons? So let's get it. Now, y'all know I want to be extremely petty with the Falcons. Y'all know I am an elite Falcons hater. They're the team I hate the most in the NFL. But honestly, we're going to keep it analytical, logical, and professional for at least the majority of this breakdown and this comparison between the Commanders and Falcons. But y'all know I want to get super duper petty with a lot of stuff. Wait for the end for that. But of course, we got to compare owners. First of all, Arthur Blank versus Josh Harris. We're talking experience versus potential. Arthur Blank's been doing it in the NFL for a long time, and he's had a fair amount of success. I definitely wouldn't necessarily consider him in the running for the top owners in the NFL, but he's definitely also not one of the worst. I'm not even going to say him play him like that, but at the same time, Josh Harris, as of so far, even though, again, we're talking experience versus potential, Josh Harris has basically been hitting 100% from the field in his very, extremely early NFL ownership career right now. I'm going to side with us just based on the potential and the ability to land guys in elite NFL minds like a Eugene Shin, a Tim McGrath, and now most recently an Adam Peters, Bob Myers, Rick Spielman. You throw those guys in there as well. And when it comes to Adam Peters, I would argue he's a better GM than any GM than Arthur Blank has ever had, in my opinion. I'm not even killing Arthur Blank. I'm not killing any of the GMs that he's had, but I'm just so much more hyped about what Adam Peters has done as being one of the best talent evaluators in the entire NFL. And for Josh Harris to be able to pull that guy, I just have more faith in Josh Harris, the owner, than Arthur Blank, the owner right now. Again, it's more experience versus potential. Josh Harris doesn't have a lot of experience as an NFL owner, but again, so far he's shooting 100% from the field with everything he's done so far. And based on that trajectory, I'm just very optimistic about him continuing on that exact path. Also, speaking of Adam Peters, and not to hate on Terry Fontenot, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, the GM for the Atlanta Falcons. Nothing against him at all. But there's only one Adam Peters, dog. So I side with Washington on the general manager side as well, just because Adam Peters is Adam Peters. I mean, he was arguably the best GM, not only just candidate, but elite team building mind before we even hired him. Like when NFL agents did their surveys and you ask around behind the scenes top NFL executives and things like that, a lot of people had Adam Peters as the best elite, just NFL mind, period. Not even just outside of GM candidates. We're including GMs and president of football operations in that pool of people, and a lot of people consider Adam Peters, if not the best, one of the best. So nothing against Terry over there with the Falcons, their GM. He's a pretty solid GM, but Adam Peters is just different, dog. He's just one of those guys. We hit a home run with that one. And then also, while you're looking on the screen right now, how about improving your team in the offseason? How about that? Like, who has the best draft capital? Well, between us and the Falcons, clearly us. Not even really close. The number 2 overall pick versus the 8th overall pick. For the second season in a row, too, for the Falcons, which is crazy. Talking about being stuck in perpetual mediocrity. They have the same exact draft pick 2 seasons in a row. That means you just made no progress at all. It's just crazy, man. Man, that's just as perpetually average as it gets, man. Whew, I love it. I love to see it, too, man. But draft capital-wise, as you can see on the screen, we have a 96.77% draft capital percentile, and the Falcons have just a 64.53%. So when it comes to draft capital, even just beyond us having a higher first round draft pick with the stronger ability to get a top quarterback in the draft, we also just overall throughout the draft have more draft capital to make a real impact for a potential head coach like a Ben Johnson. Also, still looking at the screen, let's talk about cap space capital to help improve your team and free agency potentially. We have the most cap space in the NFL, and with a wide gap between us and the second most cap space, Texans. Then you have the Falcons, who are 18th in cap space with less than half than what the Commanders have. So whoever accepts the Falcons head coaching job has way less draft capital than what the head coach accepting the Commanders head coaching job has. But even on top of that, you'll have way less cap space and cap capital to make moves in free agency as well. And I've already done a full breakdown on our cap space situation and how we can even go from nearly 90 million to over 120 million if we really, really want to. Like, how could you look at the Commanders and the Falcons and compare them in cap space and not prefer the Commanders there and draft capital like we've already talked about just now? And then now let's talk franchise quarterback like I just briefly mentioned. Draft picks matter a lot for this because neither of us have perceived franchise quarterbacks right now. I mean, a lot of people are definitely ready to move on from Sam Howell, and I wouldn't be surprised if a new GM and a new head coach want to draft their own quarterback. That's typically how it goes. And then on the Falcons side, Taylor Heinicke and Desmond Ridder are neither of those guys are franchise quarterbacks. So who has the best draft pick to potentially acquire a new franchise quarterback? And let's go ahead and get this out the way. First of all, I would prefer Sam Howell over Desmond Ridder any day, easily. That's not even close. And then on top of all of that, we have the second overall pick with the chance to get one of the top 3 draft quarterbacks in Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels. And then the Falcons with that 8th pick, if they're thinking of going quarterback at this point, they might as well just go ahead and trade back and get one of the non-top 3 quarterbacks late in the first if they want to. So if I'm a head coach, especially an offensive-minded head coach like these two guys are in Bobby Slowik and Ben Johnson, a franchise quarterback, or at the very least the ability to get one, has to be one of the top things on my checklist for a potential team fit and opportunity as a head coach. Like if I'm Ben Johnson, who has the franchise quarterback? Oh, neither? All right, so then who has the best pick or draft capital, cap space, whatever? Who has the best ability to get a potential franchise quarterback? The Commanders win that too. So far, owner, general manager, draft capital, cap space and free agency capital, and potential franchise quarterback, the Commanders are winning 100% from the field right now. And then to get the petty streak going on top of all of that, the Falcons just lost their elite defensive coordinator in Ryan Nielsen, who I really wanted, but now he's gone to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So one of the very few good things the Falcons had going for them last year, they've now lost that as well. And to keep that petty train going, who beat who last season? You know what I'm saying? Like, even just to get back to the logical side real quick, it's crazy that we beat them, but yet we are the ones completely flipping this roster upside down, rebuilding and all of that. The Falcons lost to us but they don't seem like they're headed towards a rebuild like we are. And that's actually pretty weird. Like, we beat them and we're like, man, we got to scrap this. We got to start all the way over. Fire everybody. Let's go. I mean, the Falcons did fire their head coach, and now they just lost their defensive coordinator, but they don't seem like they're going to be in a full rebuild. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to give Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder another season, especially with having the 8th overall draft pick. So even just to be petty, who beat who last year, Ben Johnson? The Commanders beat the Falcons, right? Choose us just off of that alone. But even just on the logical side of that, it's just ridiculous that we beat them. And it seems like we're more like we got to throw this thing away and start all the way over than even they are. And to get even more petty, let's keep this petty train still going. How about 3 Super Bowl victories versus none? So when we're talking team history, who's got that? We got that one too, man. Even though I can admit, though, honestly, to be completely objective, to be completely non-biased, in my lifetime, the Falcons have easily been the better team between us two. I wasn't alive for any of our Super Bowls, none of it. So I can't deny that the Falcons have been a better overall team in my lifetime as a football fan. I can admit that. But who's got the Super Bowls? Who's got the rings? Who's got the trophies? Us, man. Come on now. And then even after factoring all of that in, and you put all of those factors into like a thinking machine, there's just no way that the winning logo that comes out of that machine isn't the Washington Commanders logo. Like, just like how Adam Peters, Ian Cunningham, and Alec Hallaby were fighting each other to become our next GM, I wouldn't be surprised if Bobby Slowik and Ben Johnson aren't fighting each other to become our next head coach. Especially if the 2 most aggressive teams for their services as of this point are the Commanders and them sorry little Falcons. I mean, hey, if I'm Bobby or Ben, I'm clearly looking at the Commanders like the better choice. Come on, dog. Like, it's not hard. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please still farm that like button, still farm the subscription button, still farm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. And of course, there's going to be a serious market for Ben Johnson's services. But right now, it looks like, as far as the teams that want him the most and are the most aggressive, it seems like it's the Panthers, who seem like they've maybe have fallen out of it a little bit and just admitted, yeah, we're cooked. And just the Commanders and Falcons. And if you had to choose between those two, who would you pick? So let me know in the comment section how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Of course, stay tuned, because I'm sorry I wasn't able to get a video done last night. I'm trying to do 2-3 videos a day. I was only able to do one yesterday, but I'm definitely going to get this second one done today, because we got to do this Jaden Daniels breakdown after what Mel Kiper just did, mocking him to his number 2 overall. I'm going to cover his weaknesses, strengths, all of that. So make sure you stay tuned for that. I really appreciate y'all. Of course, I'm doing my best to try to read and reply to as many comments as possible, but as you can see, I'm extremely busy. So I'm sorry. Stay patient with me. I'm going to catch y'all later. Appreciate y'all. I'm out.